This video will walk you through how to become a great tank player in World of Warcraft. It will assume that you know the basics of your class, and this guide will not cover any gearing, gems, enchants, preferred stat distribution, different talent specs for different scenarios for each individual tank, macros, or keybinds. Instead, what this guide will focus on are individualized components that when put together will maximize your performance and help you become the greatest tank that you can be. If you get value from this video, at the end, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Now let's get right into it. The single biggest impact on becoming a great tank is how you play. Whilst some may argue that it is optimal gear dependency, proper stat distribution, having the right talents, proper keybinds and macros, playing with the right people, and sometimes even having the right hardware such as the right mouse or the right keyboard, I can assure you that these are just minor things that can help you improve once you are already a great tank. And there is a specific process for you to get there. If you take a look at the different leaderboards for different classes, different team comps, what you will see is about a 10 to 15% variation between the first and last tank within a top 100 tier list. Arguably, many of these tanks have very similar gear, if not identical in many item slots. And although they all play at a pretty high level, there are visible differences between all of them. This could not have been made more clear than in the Mythic Dungeon Invitational that took place in Dragonflight Season 1, where you could see clear player differences when you would look at the tanks of each individual teams, although they had access to the same amount of gear and to the same amount of time to practice. So what makes a great tank in World of Warcraft? Firstly, it's their ability to maximize their survivability, combined with maximizing their utility, and last but not least, maximizing their DPS. All of these three combined then get multiplied by the evaluated experience of each individual player, which gets further multiplied by each individual skill set that the tank possesses. This is the making of a great tank. We will go through each of them individually. So let's talk about maximizing your survivability. At a basic level, what this means is proper defensive cooldown usage. But at a higher level, there are other elements that come into play. There will be two types of damage that any tank will have to deal with: physical damage and magic damage. Physical damage comes in the form of auto attacks or heavy blows that can be mitigated by your armor values, can be reduced by your strength and agility values, can be parried, dodged, or even blocked. Whilst magic damage is something that can be reduced by your magic damage mitigation, can be prevented by certain spells, can be completely immune by other spells. And when they come in the form of damage over time effects, such as poisons, diseases, even curses, these can be dispelled by different abilities throughout the game. This is why you often see tanks pick spells such as Cleanse, Detox, Remove Curse, Warrior's Bitter Immunity, while others reroll to Dwarfs or to Dark Iron Dwarfs. In order for you to maximize your survivability, when it comes down to direct damage that you take, you need to understand what the source of that damage is and what is the correspondent spell within your toolkit that can help you mitigate it or completely nullify its effect. In many situations, you will have to deal with both types of damage at the same time, physical and magic, in which case abilities such as the Paladin's Guardian of Ancient Kings or Ardent Defender, the Druid's Barkskin or Survival Instinct, the Warrior's Shield Wall, the Monk's Dampen Harm, the Demon Hunter's Meta, and the DK's Icebound Fortitude are great tools to use in these scenarios. A great example is having access to Cleanse when you are doing the tree boss in Algathar Academy, popping a big defensive cooldown when the bird boss in Algathar Academy does the bleed effect on you, using a magic damage mitigation or immunity spell when the elemental boss in Algathar Academy hits you. And you can apply this information, correlating it with any trash mob or boss in any dungeon or raid. Another form of maximizing your survivability is by trying to prevent damage by either CCing the mob, kiting the mob, using kicks or stops in order to save up big defensive cooldowns. You can further maximize this by using certain types of potions, certain type of flasks, or equipping defensive trinkets, which is going to further boost your survivability. A great tip I have when maximizing your survivability is knowing how big you're going to pull ahead of time and using an add-on such as Omni CD in order to track the offensive cooldowns of your DPS inside of the party. When you start playing at a higher level, typically tanks will not die because they didn't press their defensive cooldowns. It is because they run out of them before the mobs are defeated because they either overpulled or they pulled without making sure that their DPS have the proper cooldowns in order to defeat the mobs on time. You will see this a lot when you will watch higher keys, and it was made very evident in tourneys such as MDI and the upcoming TGP, the Great Push. When it comes down to maximizing your utility, this includes three things: crowd control effects, either individual or AoE, your positioning as a tank in relationship to the mobs, as well as in relationship to your other teammates, and major cooldowns that can be used in order to save somebody's life, prevent the damage that they take, help them completely immune an ability, and in some situations, boost their damage by having the proper reaction at the right time. He got polymorphed. Yeah, so I bought him instantly because I saw that he was in meta. You can see the cooldown on meta next to the Demon Hunter on the left. When it comes down to maximizing utility, you also want to keep track of your team's interrupts, stuns, and other utility spells. Because the biggest problem when it comes down to utility, especially when you start doing higher and higher keys and higher difficult content, it's not the fact that players do not use their ability, it's the fact that too many people use them at the same time. On a tyrannical boss, this could mean that you do not have the proper spell in order to deal with that ability the second time around. And on a trash pack, it could mean that you make the mobs immune to stuns, knocks, interrupts within just one global because everybody used their utility at the same time. Another misuse of utility is when, for example, a teammate gets an external defensive cooldown from your healer, you don't pay attention to that, and you use yours on the same person at the same time, putting it on cooldown and potentially not having it available the second time around it is needed. When it comes down to maximizing your DPS, the formula is very simple. You want to be doing the most amount of spells while dealing the most amount of damage with each individual spell. For this, as a tank, you want to keep track of big cooldowns such as Bloodlust, your potion cooldowns, the cooldown of your trinkets, the internal cooldowns of proc trinkets. You also want to know which of your spells trigger global cooldowns and which of them are off the global cooldown so that you can pair them up in order to deal the most amount of damage within a certain time window. A great example for this is the Blood Decay cooldown usage that maximizes trinket usage, potions, racial abilities, and important 2-minute cooldowns that go very well together and can be used within the same DPS window in order to exponentially increase your DPS. A second way to maximize your DPS is to understand if the boss or the trash pack that you are fighting has any form of CC effects built into their casts, or if they have any type of immunity effects that they can put on themselves during your DPS window. Two great examples for this are the fourth boss in Uldaman, which after you fight him for a short while, he's going to run to the middle, become immune to damage, and spawn a bunch of adds. And the third boss in Azure Vault, which after a short time of engaging him in combat, he will become immune, fly to the middle. However, you will not get any adds or anything else to do during this time. So if you popped any cooldowns, that DPS is going to go to waste. Once you understand that, you can play around them. Another way to maximize your DPS is to understand the strength of both your group as well as you individually to know exactly how much you can pull at one time and survive before you run out of defensive cooldowns. You want to make sure that you do not pull small when everybody in your party has their cooldowns up, and you do not pull big when yourself or anybody in your team does not have access to their biggest DPS cooldowns. That is one sure way to break the key and potentially even disband the group. Once you learn how to maximize your survivability, maximize your utility, and maximize your DPS, all of these three put together will be further amplified by how much knowledge and evaluated experience you have within the actual game. The reason why I said evaluated experience and not just experience is because of this. Let me give you a simple example. You may be a very good tank at tanking low-level keys, anything between, let's say, a Mythic 2 and a Mythic 10. But in order for you to tank a Mythic 20, you need a completely new set of knowledge. And this only comes with experiencing level 20 keys. The same abilities that did not pose a threat on your level 10 key, on a 20, they will dramatically affect how you react to them and your individual performance. Same thing goes as you go higher and higher up. Whilst having a properly optimized group and the right gear can make your life easier, for every level, there's another devil. Playing a level 24 key of a dungeon is going to be completely different than playing a level 20 key of the same dungeon. And the higher up you go, the more knowledge and evaluated experience you need to have within that particular key difficulty in order to know when to use your cooldowns properly. See, the reason why I said that this amplifies all of the other three aspects is because now you know exactly how much you can stretch yourself, when to use which defensive cooldown, when to use which offensive cooldown, how dangerous a certain ability is, can you keep your utility, can you use it, how threatening it is for you to waste it, and how important is you to coordinate with the other members of your team. Unfortunately, most tanks in the game, they only have bits and pieces of knowledge by watching informational videos like this one, guides, recorded or live keys of top players running different dungeons, watching tournaments like the Mythic Dungeon Invitational or the Great Push, but nothing comes close to when you actually play the key yourself. In order to become a great tank, you must experience higher level of play. And that means sometimes that you need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So if you got very proficient at farming keys between, let's say, level 20 and 22, you must absolutely make a mental decision and push yourself to do keys 23, 24, and potentially even higher so that you can expand your horizon, get experience doing those exact keys and practicing the proper way of doing higher difficulty content. And the final piece of the puzzle that further amplifies everything we have discussed so far is your individual skill set. These come in different forms, some more easily accessible to certain players because they're almost native to them. They were born this way. However, if it's something I learned in 18 years of World of Warcraft, is that most of these skills, if not all of them, are teachable and you can pass them from player to player if they're properly motivated to learn them. As a tank, you are seen as the natural leader of your group. This means that you are always at the front of the pack, preparing for the next pull, properly positioning for the next mechanic, anticipating the next set of abilities that your team needs to deal with, and communicating properly and openly with your team, have the proper transparency so you can establish the right level of trust over time. Many tanks also adopt the role of shot calling by assigning at the beginning of the dungeon certain marks to certain players and then marking the mobs appropriately so that each dangerous ability gets dealt with by a pre-assigned person, openly communicates the route, even shares it with the whole team so they have an idea of what's coming up. And if you are in an open mic group chat, they will take the initiative to call out who is going to be the next person to kick which ability on which mob, and keep track of many things that most people don't have to deal with on a consistent basis. Other skill sets are ability to react in real time to when a mob does something that was not anticipated, either because there is something within the coding of that specific mob or boss that makes them cast sequence their ability. A great example is the third boss in Shadow Moon Burial Grounds, which can desync its abilities, and your ability to react in real time is going to show during that fight. This also means you know where to properly position for certain types of abilities. In case your team accidentally ninja pulls, you don't freak out and you know exactly what to do to gain aggro and deal with that situation. And another skill set for tanks is your ability to keep your team cohesive and bring down the temperature when things get a little bit too heated. At the end of the day, everybody is on the same page. They're running difficult content in order to defeat it and get a reward at the end. Another great way to keep the morale of your team up and at the same time optimize the overall group's DPS is to understand the cooldown windows of your DPS players. By tracking them with an add-on such as Omni CD or with a weak aura, you will be able to predict ahead of time when key players use key abilities, and at that moment you want to move the boss or the trash pack as little as possible in order to help them maximize their DPS. In some situations, like with demon hunters that are playing momentum, it is very efficient to tank a pack or a boss next to a wall so that the demon hunter travels as least as possible. Avoid moving mobs out of Retribution Paladin's Consecration or Death Knight's Death NDK/Defile. And even if you do not use a weak aura or an external add-on to keep track of these things, just by visually learning what those spells look like, you will get accustomed to them. And the more you play, the better you will understand when these cooldowns are being used and how exactly you should react to them. As with DPS, tanking multiple packs at the same time and tanking multiple bosses at the same time is a completely different skill set in it of its own. And you must not make excuses and instead master these different skills because they will help you become a better tank. One of the main roles of tanks is to enable proper DPS from the group. The fact that certain players may not do as much DPS as they can, it is virtually the fault of the tank. And having played tanks since the implementation of Mythic Plus back in Legion, not only have I been called out for this many times, but I have personally assumed responsibility for this many times. And when I course corrected, it made everybody that much more efficient. It improved the overall group's DPS, and we were able to time higher and higher keys, while at the same time having a great time together. And last but not least, the making of a great tank is also psychological. You need to make a decision. And I mean, like, you need to make a decision right now that you want to be great. Oftentimes people tell me, I just want to be good. I just want to get good at something. Just like average is the enemy of good, good is the enemy of great. So you have to make that decision that you want to become better. Unless you make that mental decision first, nothing else that you do will pretty much count for anything. The moment you hit a wall, you will quit. You will default. You will go back to whatever comfort role or comfort pick you have. And I have seen this happen with many, many tanks. Unless you, as a person, don't make the decision first that you are worth being great and you are ready to invest the proper amount of time to get there, nothing's going to help you get there. There's no guide, there's no video, there's no streamer that you can watch, there's no boost that you can be a part of, there's no group that's going to get you to a higher level. There's nobody that's going to be able to externally motivate you or get you to the proper mindset. If that was possible, everybody in the world would be rich, everybody would be fit, everybody would be a champion within their sport of choice or activity of choice. But that is not the case. If this video helped you out, understand what it takes to become a great tank and what is the making of a great tank, definitely give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't already, check a video I made where I walk you through the process of picking a main character within World of Warcraft. And if you decide to main tank either this season or in the upcoming seasons, drop me a comment down below. I like to read them. I would like to know what inspired you, and I will see you in the next video.